So I'm going to change gears here a little bit. So this is our last lecture before lunch. And it is really, really exciting, and I think this is really why you're all here, is you're waiting for the pharmaceutical companies to talk. You really don't care what we have to say up here. But we had to get you in, and I really encourage you guys to stay after lunch for the rest of the afternoon. So the good part is really about to start. The pharmaceutical companies are talking about what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and when they're doing it, which I think is what you all want to hear. So please, after lunch, stay on time because we're going to start timely, so get back here. But I'm really honored to introduce Ovid Therapeutics. So we have two people that are going to be that are very special to our community that are going to be talking to you today from Ovid. Last year, I think most of you heard Dr. Jeremy Levin, who is the chairman of the board of directors and the chief executive officer, the CEO of Ovid Therapeutics. Dr. Levin is actually very important to the whole community, but also specifically important to me. He's one of the first people I ever met when we got our diagnosis, and he took us into his office and he sat us down, my husband and I, and our pediatrician, and he talked to us about how he really is going to change Angelman syndrome and give meaningful therapeutics to the lives of our children, and I believe that he meant that. So he is here. He only flies in to talk to the community because the community means a lot to him and to the company. So it's really an honor to have him speaking with us today. And their chief medical officer, who is Amit Rakhit, Dr. Amit Rakhit, who's a physician as well. They're both physicians, and he's also the portfolio officer of Ovid Therapeutics, so that's a really fancy term that I don't really know what it means. But it really does sound fantastic, and I'm really excited for you both to come and talk to us about what you are going to do with the STARS trial for our children, and we are very excited to get started. So with all due respect. And you can also use this.
Come on up. Hello, my name's Jeremy Levin. Very nice to meet you. And for those of you I haven't met, I look forward to doing so in the future. Actually, you want me out of the way because the real guy who's going to talk is actually Amit, who will tell you about the STARS trial, which is open, which is running, and which is hopefully going to bring a real difference to the patients and your families. A couple of corrections for Alison. Thank heavens we're not a pharmaceutical company. And we'll never be one. In fact, Ovid has no intention ever of being a pharmaceutical company. I do not care for, nor do I like at all, what one sees in the pharmaceutical industry today. Our intention is to be as close as is possible and is appropriate to you and your families. I believe that there is a fundamental disconnect between those like ourselves who are trying to discover and develop medicines and the families who actually are dealing with the problem. And if we can, in our small way, and our community, and I use you if I can allow myself to be part of this community, if we can do that, if we can do it something very special, then we will do it. And we will be linked very tightly to you, not just as we develop the medicine and not at the end of developing the medicine, not just the experiment in running the clinical trials, but also every day of our life in our company, we want to be in touch with you. And we intend to do that. And some of you have had I think you'll hear a little bit more about that as we talk about how we are actually engaging with your families now and trying to help them now. Second point, I'd like to thank FAST, the board of directors of FAST, Paula, and you, Alison. Thank you again. Forgive me, I just wasn't being that mean about saying you were wrong. But the reality is, you guys are very special. And I'm incredibly excited to hear this morning just the science that's flowing in. It's extraordinary to me to hear about Scott's discussion on animal models. And yes, it does take $1 billion, but not us. It's not going to cost us $1 billion to get where we're going. And the reason it isn't is you, actually. And the reason you will make it a little different from all these big trials is because we will do very targeted trials that are associated with disorders that we understand, with children, adolescents, and adults who have a clear diagnosis. That's not the same. with the chaps out there who are doing the multi-billion-dollar trials because they're just trying them on huge populations. We're not. We're very specific. We have real theses about whether it be gene therapy, whether it be ASO. Any approach that we use is critical. And so it was exciting to me to hear David's talk about the genetic approaches, really exciting. And hopefully this afternoon we'll hear a lot more from Art and others about how new ways of attacking this disorder are coming online. Many of them are a long way away. The nearest is right now, but there's no question that even in 1 year, qualitatively and quantitatively, we have seen a fundamental difference in the overall research and approach to dealing with Angelman's. So hopefully Ovid can play a role in that, and with your help we will do. Just for those of you who know the little company, we are tiny. We are 27 people. We're based specifically, we don't have big buildings. In fact, some of you who've been to visit our places will probably smile a little bit. We spend our money, and we've got substantial amounts of capital. We spend our money on clinical trials and research and getting the best people I possibly can to help us build the company in a way that will be appropriate for you. So part of this is recruiting Amit. Now, he has a funny title, but it's not that funny, actually. What it means is that he looks at a portfolio of different disorders, a portfolio of different medicines. And as he does so, he asks the question, what will this medicine do? What will that medicine do? What will that medicine do? And they're all under his ownership, his stewardship. Now, Amit has done multiple clinical trials, not just one or two, multiple. I've known him for the better part of 20 years, plus or minus, although I'm ancient and he's young. And what has been terrific is that Ovid has brought people like Amit into the company because they're all professionals. Now, most companies don't have that luck, but they're all committed to you. More importantly, and this is a big difference, Amit is a doctor. Amit is a physician who is now running the clinical trial, the STARS trial. As he morphs, as he handles the patients, as he understands what our medicines can do, he will eventually be responsible for the commercial operations of this company, completely different from a pharmaceutical company. So that's what it means by having a portfolio, handling the portfolio. It means that we look at giving the medicine, getting it to you, ensuring that you get compensated from it from the insurance companies, et cetera, as one long continuum. It's not divorced. Even now, even as we initiate the clinical trial, we're thinking about what it will take for you to get this if we are correct and if this medicine works. I don't think other companies today can think differently. So I hope you think of us differently. I'm excited to be here today, and I want to thank you very much for your patience. I'm incredibly excited to see the number of people who've come here. And I, having done many, many, many clinical trials, I know absolutely that what has been catalyzed here in the community is going to make a fundamental change to this disorder. And I'm extremely confident, not just a little bit, extremely confident that we will see fundamental differences in the way that we treat and manage this disorder and hopefully cure it. So without little ado, let me bring Amit up. And by the way, I've got lots of questions for him, so I hope you will do as well. And I'm not sitting down. I'm going to sit here and just listen to him. That'll possibly intimidate him a touch, but not too much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great. Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay without being so close? Okay. So thank you, everybody. I'm very, very excited and to follow Jeremy's lead, who's a much more eloquent speaker than I am. But I have to say, it's a pleasure to be here. I've met many of you already, and just seeing this room full of people who are really active in the community and really want to make a difference is just great. So thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting us. So I'm here to speak to you about the STARS trial, which is our first clinical trial in Angelman Syndrome for Ovid Therapeutics. As many of you know, this is a study that we've been working on for about a better part of a year or so, and with much of your input. And so I'm happy to say that it has progressed significantly since the last time we saw each other together, and when you saw Jeremy and other folks from Ovid here last year. The website is actually, I just listed it here, thanks to the FAST team, angelmanstudy.com, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But what I thought I'd do is give you a little bit of a background of what the trial is, explain where we are with the clinical trial process. I'll give you a little bit of detail in terms of the study design and inclusion-exclusion criteria, and then where you can find more information if you or a loved one or another family that you know is interested in participating. And then ultimately, we're going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about some of the work that we're doing on an innovative side and how we can partner as a community and some of the work we've done with Stacy Ruddick's family, and we'll share that to you towards the end. So with that, do I have a clicker? Is this the clicker? No. Could you advance the slide for me? Oh, great. So the STARS trial. So one question I did get, because some of you who may have seen the webinars that we did with FAST and the ASF Foundation, one of the questions that I received, why are we spending so much time on a logo and what does STARS mean? Well, the STARS trial is actually an acronym for is a phase 2 adult Angelman Syndrome clinical trial, a randomized double-blind safety and efficacy study of gaboxetol. So saying that from a registration perspective or when you're speaking to the FDA and others, it's a lot to say. So STARS is actually a nice way of making that a little bit compact. But the logo itself was actually was crowdsourced by the community, and this is Kayleen Gillespie's interpretation of this is her family right there, and she actually helped create this logo for us for STARS and reaching for opportunity there. So let me just go take you through what the trial itself means. So it's a phase 2 study. So Allison mentioned the drug development process earlier today, from the preclinical perspective as well as the clinical perspective. We are actually a little bit further along than just having interactions with FDA. We're actually in a phase 2 setting. So phase 2 means that it's actually, this compound has passed many preclinical toxicology, safety studies that we would do in animal models already. This compound has been found to have a very good safety profile. And we've looked at this initially in adults who had insomnia, so sleeping disturbance. Ultimately, it wasn't developed in that indication, but there was data in about 3,000 people that we know that this compound is actually fairly safe. When you look at that adults part, we're starting with an adult population. And many people have asked, why are we starting in adults? One of the reasons is that because this compound was studied in adults with insomnia, we have the most information in adults. We don't have much information in people who are less than 18 years of age. This study is actually a registrational study, so this means that ultimately we hope that this will help us to pursue a phase 3 program and ultimately lead to a medicine that can be available to all of us. In order to do that, it's very important that the regulators, so FDA in the US, EMA in Europe, the other regulatory agencies around the world, are comfortable with the safety and efficacy profile of what we provide to them. And so to do that, we have to be very methodical in how we approach this drug development. And in order to go into pediatrics, or in order to go into less than 18 years of age, we need to show that the drug will behave the same in pediatric populations as well as in adult. Because pediatrics, they're not just little adults, they have a very different physiology, they have very different metabolism, and so we have to do what's called a PK study, a pharmacokinetic study, and that's something that's underway, and we hope to have results on that sometime early next year. Clinical trial is randomized, so there are 3 treatment arms, which I'll show you in a little bit. Randomized means that it's by chance that you get assigned to one of those 3 treatment arms. It's double blind, which means I don't know which arm you got randomized to, you don't know which randomized arm you're in, and the investigator or your clinicians won't know either. This is done in a way that maintains the integrity of the study so that we can actually make it a scientific interpretation that's acceptable to the regulatory agencies. It's a safety and efficacy study. Typically, the phase 1-2 studies are more safety-oriented, so we're looking at safety. As I mentioned, we're fairly comfortable with the safety profile of this compound. It has efficacy in there. These are exploratory efficacy markers. I'll show you some of the things we're looking at. We're looking at things way beyond sleep. I know that was a question that I had before as well. So with the next slide, if you could advance the slide, that'd be great, because I don't think I have a clicker. Oh, great. Thanks. So this is the study design. Do I have a clicker? Oh, this thing?
No, this.
Oh, that thing. Oh, great, thanks. All right, thank you. All right, so this is the study design. This is very much a schematic. It shows you that this is the, so there's basically 4 sections of this study from left to right. There's a screening period. And the screening period can last up to 1 month, up to 28 days. This is the time when we can see, do you qualify for the study? Are there anything around some of the inclusion criteria that may not make the study the best choice for you? Can you swallow pills or somehow take the medicine? This is the time when we see if you can wear a certain device, which I'll talk about, to help monitor sleep. That's the screening period. Once you pass the screening period, you basically get to a baseline visit. The baseline visit is kind of our starting point that says time 0, where everybody can actually so we can all say we all start at the same point. And after that, you get randomized, what I talked about, randomization. So a computer program actually has a blinded way of, so I can't really, I don't know, and as I said, the investigators don't know, you don't know, but basically the computer program will assign a treatment box or a treatment package. And then this would actually, once you're in the study, randomize you to one of these treatment arms. And the treatment arms are one which is a dose called Schedule A, which may be twice a day active doses. There might be Schedule B, which is once a day active dosing. And then there might be a placebo, which you may be taking treatment medications, but there's no active substance in them. That's placebo. That lasts for up to 12 weeks. And at 12 weeks, the study completes, and we do a follow-up visit. In between those visits, there are multiple phone visits that we keep in touch and make sure things are going well as adjust anything that needs to be adjusted during that time. With me so far? So good. All right. So going to the next slide here. So what are some of the actual efficacy measures that we're looking at? Like I mentioned, the primary focus of this study is safety. So we will be collecting blood samples. We will be collecting information about vital signs. We will do that consistently as part of the safety profile of the treatment medicine, of the treatment compound. Some of the exploratory measures that we're looking at are listed here. They're not all of them, but these are probably the highlights of the ones that we're looking at. So as also Allison mentioned before, gaboxidol, which is the active compound in OV101, is thought to play a role in tonic inhibition. And restoring tonic inhibition can hopefully and potentially alleviate some of the symptoms that we see in Angelman syndrome. So by restoring tonic inhibition, and if it does work, and I say potentially because we're not sure yet how it will affect in the clinical population, potentially we'll see changes in gait and balance. That's most likely one of the more earlier effects that you may see with restoring tonic inhibition appropriately. And this can be measured by gross and fine motor activity. Some of the gross motor actions that we're looking at is the ability to walk. We're walking on actually a computerized mat, which actually, as you walk across it, measures all sorts of information about how your step is, where your center of gravity is, how you're balancing, how quickly you're walking, and it will hopefully be able to show a difference between a baseline visit, which I showed you before, and 12 weeks later when we do that test again. The second thing we're also looking at is questionnaires about movement, and there's actually a video that we'll do a before and after, so you actually get a chance to see if there's any improvement or any changes from one visit to the last visit. We're also looking at fine motor activities, and those also are primarily through questionnaires. So we rely a lot on not just the clinicians at the sites, but mostly the caregivers, because most of this is going to be observations and your interpretation of what's going on at home. And so the clinician is part of the reported by column, but you'll see that the caregiver is really, really important. So the primary caregiver is a real integral, active participant in this study. Other things we're looking at is sleep. So I mentioned this compound was initially evaluated in sleep. We know that there are people with Angelman syndrome that have disturbances of sleep. So we're going to look at that. And one way we'll do that is the traditional method, which is e-diaries. There's a little handheld device, and you check in if there's any problems with sleep or any issues with sleep. But we're also adding a secondary wearable device, and it's a watch. It's a watch that can be placed on either the wrist, you could put it on the ankle, wherever makes sense, and we're asking you to wear it, both the participant as well as the caregiver. And so what we're looking at is a specific watch. This watch, it actually collects a lot of information, but the information we're particularly interested in is about sleep. And it'll capture information about number of awakenings, if you woke up, if you walked around, when you had quiet sleep, how many times you woke up, and this information we can correlate together, and hopefully we'll see a difference with that as well. The next efficacy measure is the clinical global impression, and this is done by the clinician. It's basically a progression of, as a questionnaire that looks at potential improvement over time. We're looking at behavior, specifically anxiety, and this we really rely on the caregiver to give us a sense, because everybody's anxiety levels are expressed in very different ways, and so it's really the primary caregivers who really know how to evaluate that. And then we're also looking at health-related quality of life. These are anything from days lost from work to other factors that kind of around working with the family about how your day-to-day life it may be impacted. And the final measure I've mentioned here is EEG. So we are doing a baseline EEG as well as a final EEG. This is to look at seizure activity. Again, if the compound does work in this, in restoring tonic inhibition, one of the earlier signs that we may see is a change in seizure activity, or if not blatant seizures, at least in the change on the waveforms on EEGs, the epileptiform activity, and that's why we're interested in EEGs as well. So with that, let me go on to inclusion criteria. I'll take questions afterwards, so just if you have a question, just jot them down, and I can get to them after I kind of go through these next few slides. So the inclusion criteria, age is 18 up to 49 years of age. Again, I mentioned 18 because we don't have the PK information yet in pediatrics. 49 is the upper age group. Beyond 49, you start getting into other illnesses associated with older age. So we didn't want to make sure that, that we didn't kind of mix up too many different syndromes, such as if you have cardiovascular disease or heart disease, that you start getting signs of diabetes potentially as you get older. A molecular confirmation of Angelman syndrome. So this is important. So if you have a documented diagnosis, that's great. If you don't have a documented diagnosis and you need to get the molecular testing done, we will do it for you. So so that we can make sure that everybody in the study has a documented molecular confirmation. Stable dose of medications. I know that many people are on multiple different regimens of medicines or diets or whatever makes things work for that individual. That's okay. There are certain medications that are not allowed for sleep, which we can get to, but if there's specific questions, but that's okay as long as they've been stable for about a month. You have to be on stable medications and diet and regimen and not anticipated to change throughout the course of the 3-month study. So other things are that are not allowed, I'll just mention, because this also did come up, cannabidiols and supplements that are not FDA approved overall are not allowed. But if you're on stable dosing for 4 weeks beforehand, you're good to go from this perspective. Informed consent, a legally authorized representative. That may be the parent caregiver, it may be somebody else. That varies from state to state. So this is a state-mandated law that the informed consent must be given by somebody who's legally authorized. So if you have a question with that, your clinical sites will most likely know. Or you can ask us, and we can find out for you. Able to attend the scheduled visits. There are 4 visits, as I mentioned, the baseline and the screening, which are fairly close together. It may potentially be within the same visit. We're working on that. There is that final visit, the 6-week visit and the 12-week visit. So there's 4 total visits that are in the clinic. The other visits are by phone. Able to swallow the study drug. It comes in a capsule. So if you can take the capsule, with water or with applesauce or a little bit of food, that's preferable. If for some reason that doesn't work, there is the ability to open the capsule in a small amount of food. We prefer the capsule be taken whole. And here's the bottom one, which I know it's something that is really tempting always to communicate, especially when you're excited about being involved in something new. But it's really for the integrity of the trial that we ask caregivers not to post data or information related to the study or how the participant may be doing onto social media or any other website. And the reason is that that can potentially invalidate some of the results, whether it's through unintentional unblinding of a person, or what's more important is a placebo response, is what we're very, very concerned about, is that we don't have a placebo response. We'll actually be sending, we're in the kind of preparing a short video on what placebo response is in this kind of easy to understand language that we'll post sometime in the near future to really talk about what placebo response is. But basically, what we're looking for in this study is based on statistics. And so if you have 2 lines, let's say, that are very on top of each other, it's very difficult to tell if there's 2 lines, right? If they're right on top of each other, it looks like 1 line. Basically, what we're trying to look for in some of these measures is a separation of lines, right? Hoping that the treatment will actually have an effect and potentially placebo doesn't have an effect. And if that's the case, your lines would actually separate. Statistically, it's much easier to see lines that are further apart than if they're closer together. But if with placebo response, what happens is that you think things are going well, but you're actually not on active drug. You make the lines artificially come up together because the placebo response, that's the placebo response. And so it's harder for us to tell if there is a difference, if there really is one. Exclusion criteria. There's not that many, but the exclusion criteria is that if you're not ambulatory at all. So you can walk with a cane, you can walk assisted, but if you're completely wheelchair-bound, unfortunately, this study, because one of the primary measures is the walking on the mat, that's the reason. Now, in the future, will there be other studies? Potentially, yes. But for this particular study, that's the one exclusion criteria, is that if you can't walk at all. Poorly controlled seizures, other illnesses that make it not a great idea to be in an investigational study, so whether it's heart disease or lung disease or liver or blood or kidney disease. And then this is not as much of a issue in this population, but legally and by FDA regulations, we have to put this exclusion criteria in here, pregnancy or not using a suitable contraception. So here are the sites that are actually now going to be participating in this clinical trial. So there's 15 sites that have been identified across the US. We're actually also going to be opening a site in Israel. So which is in a few, probably next year. The site that's most likely to open most quickly and is active currently is Phoenix. So Phoenix site, Dr. Melamad's site, is open, has been initiated. The next couple of sites that will open is Dr. Weaver's site out in Tampa, and Rush Medical Center here in Chicago. So those 3 are the sites that are initiated, ready, A couple more, I think, tweaks, a few more days, I think, for some people to get some supplies in, but those are the ones that are ready. But you see the sites that are already identified here, and they're pretty much across the US. San Diego, if you can't see it, I'll just read it to you. San Diego, Phoenix, Tampa, Chicago, Lexington, Mass., which is outside of Boston, Boston, which is Boston Children's, Cincinnati, Greenwood, South Carolina, Gainesville, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Nashville, Tennessee, Salt Lake City, Utah, Seattle, Washington, Rochester, Minnesota, and San Antonio, Texas. So those are all the sites we really thank all, and some of the study coordinators and physicians are here, really thank all of them for participating. Most are on their way to having their IRB submissions completed or approved, and we hope to have most of these sites initiated within the next month or two, depending on IRB approval timelines. So 3 are about to open, and about several others will open consistently across those times. So how do you get more information about this clinical website? This is the website. This is active as of today. This morning, this site went live, angelmanstudy.com. You can, and I'll show you here, this is the Quintanilla family here, and I want to thank many of the families who are here today and helped us with the website, as well as allowing us to use their images here. This first part of the website will tell you about the study itself, a little bit about what to expect, the treatment choices, and then at the bottom you see a take the pre-screener who qualifies. That's the way you actually kind of get more information and put your name in kind of on our ability to contact you appropriately through the site coordinators. Here, the Yoakum family here, there's an FAQ section, which will have frequently asked questions, anything about what's the placebo, what's the study design. The Lees family and Eberhard family is talking a little bit about clinical research, what it is, if you've never actually participated in a clinical trial. A little bit about us, Ovid Therapeutics. And then this pre-screener is in there, and this will take you. This is one of the first shots of the pre-screener. Do you want to continue? As you go through, it'll ask you a series of questions. Mostly of the questions I asked you are the inclusion-exclusion. And then what we'll then ask is, do you have a preferred site? It will list all the sites. You can pick the site that's closest to you geographically. It will tell you whether the site is active or soon to be active. If you're soon to be active, that's still fine. You can still pick that site. Once they become active, they'll contact you. They may contact you before, but once they, so you'll be able to do that. And then it'll ask you for your contact information. So as a sponsor, as the running the trial, we can't have direct contact with you specifically about the study. So I would speak with your primary healthcare provider, making sure that they're on board with participating in a clinical trial. And then the site coordinators and investigators have been really, really just wonderful about information flow and how the study is working, and can really resolve a lot of questions. Anything outside the study, I'm happy to answer, but I can't say you can be in the study or not. So that's not it has to be with your clinician and the site itself. So this site is active. You can log on to it with your mobile phone if you wanted to, and we have a desk outside actually that has some iPads that if you're not getting a signal in here, you can actually sign up that way as well. So I think, yeah, let me take questions now before moving into this section. Any questions? Yeah. Yes. So the question, I'll just repeat the question, is that this compound was developed earlier for sleep with a Merck and Lundbeck collaboration. And the question was, it was discontinued because of safety issues on hallucinations in certain population. Actually, the hallucinations were found, so it's a very interesting finding in that in a subsegment of population of people who had previous history of substance abuse or history, that there was a subset of populations who experienced an effect called euphoria when they took the compound. So it wasn't quite hallucinations, but it was a feeling good, right? So feeling good. What that means is typically that if you have that sensation in a compound that's under development, automatically it becomes what's called a Schedule II compound, right? Schedule II are those compounds that you need, a prescription, and they're controlled substances. And because the compound was initially being developed in sleep as a competitor to well-known other brands, Zolpidem, or known as Ambien, it was not going to be as competitive to Ambien at the time. And so more of a commercial reason to really withdraw it rather than a safety reason. We have data in about 3,000 plus adult individuals. And the most common side effects that have been seen with this have been a little nausea, headache, sometimes a little bit of dizziness, but nothing more serious than that over the long term.
Actually, can I make a comment on that? I'm not sure if, just to be very clear, this is a drug that was discontinued for commercial reasons. It was a tiny subfraction of the 3,000 patients who were actual drug addicts or had previously been drug addicts who took this, and as a consequence of that experience, what you saw there. The rest of the patients did, some of them, a few of them, there were minor side effects on them. But the fact is that it wasn't those side effects which terminated. Lundbeck and Merck had decided that they wanted a drug to be a major competitor. And unfortunately for them, there's a gesture which you can't see, which basically was this, and that's the reason. Yes. One other aspect, they actually didn't know the mechanism of this drug. They assumed it was a GABA agonist, and many of the work that you saw subsequently showed that this was a specific extrasynaptic GABA receptor agonist, and it's the only one. And that was discovered subsequently, and the work that showed that that was significant in mice all happened subsequent to the termination. So.
Great. Question right here. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question about the ambulation, because I know that there's multiple ways of moving around outside of a wheelchair, and there are many people who can crawl or walk on their knees. And I'm curious if maybe your measures might include imaging, like putting little markers on somebody and seeing how their arms move versus their legs, or if you're just testing the pressure and various information that you gather from the treadmill per se.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we haven't considered walking on knees, I think, or crawling. So that is something I'll take back to the team. But we are looking at basically, it is a mat, it's a treadmill. So whether you're walking with a cane or assisted with somebody's hand, basically it measures your various gait. Basically, it's similar to, you see this, the mat on the screen, it'll show you all the footprints going back and forth, and then we'll compare that between it before and after. We also do take a videotape, which basically measures the gait so that you're not identifiable, but it just shows the walking. But I will answer that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that about crawling and knee, but we can take that back to the team. So thanks for that question.
Yeah, and I have another one about the behavior and the anxiety. And I'm just curious, does that little watch like measure blood pressure or any other physical mannerisms that would indicate anxiety?
That's a great question. So the watch is, so some of these devices now collect a lot of information, and sometimes too much information that, some of it that we're not really analyzing. So we're really interested in the sleep parameters that this device captures. It does capture heart rate and not specifically blood pressure, I don't think, but it definitely heart rate and rhythm and other parameters are collected. So we're working with the vendor, we'll be working with the vendor to understand what additional pieces of information might be useful there, but it does collect quite a bit of information.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking heart rate, but I said blood pressure, so thank you.
Yeah, great.
Does anybody else have a question and they don't want to stand?
I have a question. I actually have the microphone over here. I'm sorry, I'm really loud anyway. What is the timeline for this study? Like, I know people have to be 18. Our son's soon to be turning 18. Is it going to be starting right away? Is it something that's still a few months out? You know, at what point can we think maybe we can register him or not?
Yeah, so you have to be 18 at the time of informed consent. So as soon as when you sign the informed consent, that's when you must be 18 by. So the trial is just starting now. We don't have our first patient in yet, but I would say that over the next several months, we expect to recruit up to 75 people, that are participants. It really depends on how quickly we recruit. So it's difficult to say. I would say definitely through the most of first half of next year we'll be recruiting, but it really depends on how quickly people show interest and are enrolled into the trial. So I can't quite tell you a hard date, but very much over the next several months. Any other? Yeah. Yeah, yes. So great question. So the watch, so we realize that some of these measures aren't as easy to do. So the watch, per se, I wouldn't say is Angelman. I would say we've asked to be creative on how somebody would wear the watch. So if you want to use a hospital band, for example, that's why I think that might work. If you want to use an ankle, and that's why there's a screening period as well. So we get you used to the watch to see if it works for you, and hopefully you kind of get used to it, and then we're able to actually be in the study. I'll also mention, because you do mention, we have modified a lot of the questionnaires. So things like the Baileys and Vineland and people, measures that are typically used in some of these testing questionnaires, we've modified to be a little bit more appropriate as much as possible to the community. Yeah.
Allison talked to us at the beginning about sort of 3 tracks to treating Angelman. This is obviously the 3rd track, downstream therapeutics. Mm-hmm. So 2 questions. 1, is Ovid working on any of the first 2 tracks? And number 2, how might gaboxidol, if it's proven effective, interact with those other treatment forms should they come online?
Yeah. Do you want to take that? Yeah.
So Ovid is committed to taking additional resources on all of these areas. So we view this as the first step of what is an appropriate pipeline of new medicines. What we have decided to do in this instance is to take a medicine that we believe has got a terrific safety profile, use that as our starting point, which is downstream. Obviously, we understand that. In light of the fact that all the other therapies which are coming along, and they're really interesting, the AAV, the oligonucleotides and others, we want to bring those in as we feel that there is really terrific promise, and where they are, we will definitely do that, and more particularly when we know that they're safe. So as regards building the pipeline, what you've seen over the last year is step 1. What we also gain out of that is something very important, and the question about I'm sorry, I can't see because it's a big light here, but it's a very good question about the watch. Remember, what Amit has established is a fundamentally professional clinical trial. This is not something that any outside agency can look at and have any questions about the structure of it, the way it's conducted. And with the help of the community, what we're also doing is defining the endpoints, how to measure them, how to quantitate them, because the FDA has never gone through the process of understanding how to evaluate new medicines for Angelman's in a very rigorous fashion. So it's not only us and you working together, and us and the physicians working together. We have a duty, as we see it, to educate the FDA so that they understand what it is that it's going to take to look at improvements in these children. And if I can, we went to the FDA with one family member, and the family member, she described her daughter, who's 12 years old, and when the FDA, in the discussion, said, you know, what is clinically significant? And she said, well, my daughter uses American Sign Language and she has one sign. It would be great if she did two. And it was an interesting comment because the FDA is very open. We need to talk to them. They're terrific to work with. We really have great value in that discussion, but it's our duty also to educate them. So there are several things you get out of this. The second part of your question, how to interact with these, we don't know, but the primary, that's the honest truth. Nobody does. Theoretically, there should be no concern about it interacting, theoretically, but that's something that we will absolutely examine every step in every additional medicine that we bring in. It's our duty to ensure that the children and the young adults and the adults that you care for are safe. And we understand that, and so we'll make sure that we understand those interactions. If there are any, theoretically, as I say, there shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I'll mention also that we have partnered with the community on all the outcome measures. So Allison Paula from FAST, we worked with Angelman Sydrome Foundation, the steering committee that runs the trial. So it's not just Ovid Therapeutics, but we have an external steering committee that actually manages the overarching trial design and execution. So Dr. Ron Thiebert at Mass General is the chairperson of that steering committee. And also includes Dr. Alex Kolofson from Mount Sinai, Mount Sinai, as well as Becky Burdine, who's from Princeton, as many of you know, as a family representative. And we also have Dr. Limbird and Dr. Wenhan Tan as the heads of the publication data committee as well. So we are reaching out to the community and making sure that involvement and that expertise is brought in. So any more questions? One more question.
Yes. If you are a participant in the study, and at the end of the study, you have been in the placebo division, will you have access to the drug after that?
Good question. So that's what you're asking for, is if there's an open label extension at the end of the study. So typically in a phase 2 study, we wouldn't do an open label extension. And the reason is that we have to look at the data to make sure that overall, we're still comfortable with the safety profile, as well as if there's explored any kind of trends on efficacy. Now, once we start a phase 3 program, so if it looks like we're moving forward with the compound and that we have agreement with the regulators, we would actually start a kind of what we call a pivotal registrational study in phase 3, which would have an open label extension by regulations. So people who, so we've committed, we spoke to a couple sites about this, people who have participated in the phase 2 STARS trial, while the open label extension will not be immediately available, provided everything moves forward, then when the open label extension does become available, anybody who participated in STARS can automatically enroll into the open label extension without having to do anything further, right? So that is something we committed to. Now the timing I can't tell you about because it depends on when the phase 2 study is done and when we have our discussions with regulators and when we start our phase 3, but it's something in the plan that's, if you participate in phase 2 STARS, then you would be eligible to, if you choose to, be in the open label extension when it's open. Oh yeah, so I should move on to this. So I will be available for any other questions and stuff. One last question? One last question.
It's just a real quick question. I have multiple angels, and I understand what the age limit is, so I have 2 that it would be in that qualification. Do you have a limit of 1 per family, or
Nope.
I
Nope.
could just enroll as many as I want?
You know, yep.
I
no
have
limit.
4, by the way, so they're all like boom, boom, boom,
There's
boom.
no limit per family. So I
Okay,
think
great.
it's okay. I'm going to show you a quick video. I think one thing, I'm going to take 5 more minutes of your time if I could. So we are very interested at Ovid Therapeutics in partnering with you beyond just drug development. We really want to make a difference for the community and make sure that we partner with you in all steps of this journey. So one thing we did do is we worked with a group at Exponential Medicine, which happened in San Diego in October, and really helped understand, how we can partner together and work with a maker community, an innovator maker community. And I'm going to show you this video. If they could play this video, and then invite Stacy Ruddick, who was our family who we worked with, to describe her experience. The video, I think, is embedded in that. Oh, maybe it's not embedded. Maybe you won't see the video. Oh, is there an audio?
Expert to her and their needs.
It's been about 3 weeks since I heard from Ovid to see if I was interested or if I could come and be a part of this make-a-thon. It's just been such an amazing experience that all of these people came from such a far place away to come and work with me and my kids.
TOM is a movement of makers working globally to address unmet needs of people with disabilities. We look for challenges and develop prototypes in a 3-day make-a-thon. You may be a makers or you may be a need knower. Makers have 48 hours starting this midnight to come up with solutions. We're going to bring live action into exponential medicine.
Stacy was kind enough to host a group of crazy makers in her home just before the conference began. We met with the kids and with Stacy herself and collected challenges. Some of the children has got issues with using the iPad. So we took a design of the software. We used a laser cutter to cut a frame that connects and attaches to very specific applications. You can very easily customize it. The design for this is open online. We handed off this project and some other to the local makers here because some of us are going to go back to Israel or to Canada or to the US, wherever they came from. And we want Stacy to be able to continue communicating with local makers. We were fortunate to have the local makers here with us.
And our world is full with opportunity to do amazing things and to marvel with them. Join us.
So, thanks, Stacy. They know you well.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Stacy. I have 3 children with Angelman Sydrome. And it was a great opportunity to have Tom come. Like the video said, it was about 3 weeks from the time that Jeremy contacted me until the time that the make-a-thon happened. It was great to have everybody come into my house and to sit down with my kids and just start talking about challenges and the ways that they could help our people with loved ones in everyday life. Some of the things that they came up with are available, out there already, but are hard to get or they're expensive to come by. So one of the things that they came up with was the key guard or grid for the iPad. And like it said in the video, this is open and online, so you can go to a local maker place. I didn't know these places existed, and have them print this up for you also. So it's out there at no charge. We're also still talking about and working on some other projects, possibly being able to detect seizures in sleep and not just clonic seizures, but non-clonic seizures, so that we can see what's disrupting our kids' sleep, how to help them better when they start possibly getting into trouble. So I just want to thank Ovid Therapeutics, Tom for coming out, and everybody from the bottom of my heart. It was really just a beautiful experience.
Thank you. So I'll just wrap up, and thank you, Stacy. We do have actually at our table outside, for those of you who do use Proloco To Go or Pod. Some of those, we have about 100 each, I think, out there for you guys to take if you're interested. And please visit Oded, who's one of the Tom makers, who's here today and can customize a solution for you if those don't work for you and help you with that. But thank you very much for the time and effort. We really look forward to working with you as our trial and as our development program continues.